Warning, the following program contains graphic details of sexual abuse committed by the Catholic Church. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Critical Junction, episode 48. I'm Mark.
I'm Luke.
I'm Jill.
And last week, on Tuesday, September 25th, 2018, the German Bishops' Conference released a report that concluded at least 1,670 Catholic clergy were involved in at least 3,677 cases of sexual abuse between 1946 and 2014. According to the report, every sixth case involved rape, and some 969 abuse victims were altar boys. This comes on the heels of the Pennsylvania grand jury report released on August 14, 2018, following a 2-year investigation that concluded more than 300 priests had molested at least 1,000 children, and quite possibly more, since the 1940s, which the now Archbishop of Washington, D.C., Donald Wuerl, systematically covered up. In these cases, the majority of victims were young boys, but some were also girls. According to the CBC, the sexual abuse, quote, ranged from groping and masturbation to anal, oral, and vaginal rape, end quote. The report goes on to detail the grotesquerie of these abuses, including one in which a 9-year-old boy was forced to perform oral sex on a priest and then had his mouth washed out with holy water. Senior officials within the church, the temporal representatives of God's so-called moral authority, systematically failed to report these abuses to police out of fear of bad publicity and financial liability, and the Vatican, rather than do anything to protect the victims, instead willfully chose to side with the abusers, often shuffling the clergy responsible to different dioceses. All of these cases, which are by no means a new occurrence, would tend to solidify the notion that the Catholic Church is a morally bankrupt criminal organization that cares more for its own power and greed than the souls of the people of whom it pretends to be the custodians. And where was God during all this abuse? Why was there no intercession on the part of the supposedly almighty, all-knowing, and all-loving creator of the universe? As far as I can tell, only 3 possibilities exist. Either God was unable to intervene to prevent it, making him inept or incompetent or both, or he was unwilling to intervene to prevent it, making him immoral and evil, or, quite simply, God does not exist. If either of the first of the two scenarios is true, God allowed these atrocities to happen and is thus undeserving of either adoration or worship, and the Church must be held criminally responsible. If the third and arguably far more likely scenario is true, the Church allowed these atrocities to happen and must still be held criminally responsible. So, in light of the continued and systemic sexual abuse that runs rampant among its clergy, why do people continue to support the Catholic Church, either financially or through ongoing participation in its hollow rituals? And are the people who do so complicit in the Church's criminal activities, as some people have suggested? Let's talk about that, shall we?
You're a bit on God was a bit heavy-handed there, Mark.
Do you think it was heavy-handed? I think it was pretty appropriate.
Appropriate, sure, within the context kind of thing, but I don't know.
I think it's totally deserving. I don't see that as disproportionate in the least. So the main issue with it for me, I guess, is like the only reason why this has been able to sort of metastasize into such a shitty phenomenon is that the church itself is supposed to be basically the institution that is sort of an authority on the moral aspect of human life, right? They try to make themselves as, like, you know, the house of God and
right, the house of good, and this is supposed to be good.
They're basically the mediators between humans and God, right? At least that's how they position themselves. So this whole institution is supposed to represent morality, basically, and then at the same time within this institution there's this abhorrent abuse that's happening and sort of the epitome of immorality, which shouldn't be possible if this institution had any kind of special claim to moral righteousness or you know what I mean. So there's like a perverse kind of built-in block to even sussing out abuse in there, because it kind of has to protect its reputation as sort of something that is like a voice for God's law and stuff like that.
Right. Like I said, they're supposed to represent, or they're the temporal representatives of God's moral authority, or so they portray themselves, right? And this is, there is nothing immoral about what the church has been doing. And this has been going on for longer than these reports detail.
Yeah,
right?
I guess there's no real evidence that they were ever not corrupt. Like, is there any evidence that it was a slow corruption that led to this or anything like that? Like,
I think you can definitely see varying levels of corruption throughout the church for its entire existence. Right? Corruption in the church is not news. Like they're a corrupt organization. Well, everyone knows it, and yet people continue to support them, either, like I said, financially or through ongoing participation in the rituals. So that was the question I opened with. Like, are the people who continue to support this criminal organization, which I'm going to continue calling them a criminal organization.
Yeah, you're right. That's
but are these people complicit in the church's activities? Some people would argue that they are.
So the thing is the criminal activity happens by members of this institution, and some members, some other members might not be in any way involved, not on the cover-up level or the actual abuse level, and because the institution has such a big kind of mandate, then I think it's kind of hard to just dismiss the institution or characterize it as criminal, as if that was its main purpose, or you know what I'm saying? It's like,
well, let me try to.
It's like, just because some governments are corrupt, or some parts of some governments are corrupt, it doesn't make the concept of government a criminal enterprise.
It may not make the concept corrupt, or whatever you were saying, right? But the actual organization, having been proven to be corrupt and criminal, I think it's a fair label to call it a criminal organization. Like, I'm not saying it's a criminal organization in the same way that the mafia, for example, is a criminal organization whose main purpose is to facilitate criminal activities. But the members that make up the Catholic Church, who are criminally responsible for this, warrant the term criminal organization as far as I'm labeling it.
Well, what I find funny is that it's because they're representing moral action and stuff like that. Where is the good that they're representing in any way, sort of thing? It's immediately dismissed. So they cancel themselves out by letting this occur, sort of thing. Whereas, for example, with capitalism and running governments, we can say that's organized crime as well. But we're suggesting that it's what we've done with it that isn't good. Like, whereas the Catholics, what I'm suggesting is what good have they done? What is the good that
a lot
they're
of people
representing?
would make the argument that they're the world's biggest charitable organization, and they do all these different activities under the guise of charity, right?
Yeah.
But like you said, by virtue of all these other abuses that take place, not to mention the corruption that's pretty self-evident within the church, I think that kind of cancels out the whatever amount of good deeds that they do, right? Just follow along your train of thought there.
Yeah. You're Picarding it. You're like, no, I will say no from henceforth, sort of thing.
This far, no further.
I may be drawing a line in the sand here, a la Picard, but I think it's warranted. Like, I don't see, like, the church has enough money in its coffers to pay for all the abuses that it's conducted.
Oh yeah, so what's with that? Why do they have a mountain of treasure, basically?
They literally have a mountain of treasure at their disposal.
Like, I don't really understand
Like
what...
Scrooge McDuck.
what are they doing there? I don't really understand how that even symbolically represents anything, or I don't really understand why they have treasure. Why hasn't a pope gone, you know what, let's loot our loot and hand it out to the peoples of the world.
Because the other funny thing is that, like, churches are folding left, right, and center and being converted into yuppie loft spaces,
or
right?
pizza places.
Because attendance is just falling, and individual churches just don't have a population that can tithe or whatever, or donate through collections or whatever to keep just to do basic upkeep of a church, and so the institution is just bleeding sort of branches of itself, and yet they're sitting on a pile of treasure. Like, why wouldn't they use that treasure to prop themselves?
Well, for good, for what they claim that they are.
But either way. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just being skeptical about just how much of a pile of treasure the church itself has, and whether it's not just individuals within the church that basically embezzle, like use it as a sort of an embezzling avenue, and they're just filling their own personal bank accounts, right?
With golden chalices and
yeah,
statues. Yeah. I don't know why they don't. Well, some people might make the argument that it's really difficult for them to liquidate some of the treasure assets that they have. Like, who's going to buy a Michelangelo or whatever, But at the same time, they do have things they can liquidate, like these empty churches you were talking about. That money can be used to repair some of the damage they've done with all these abuses. I mean, the Pope came out recently and quote-unquote apologized for what happened, but
yeah.
I don't think that kind of apology is sufficient. I don't know if monetary compensation will be enough to undo that damage. Certainly not undo it.
There is no undoing.
Right.
It's done.
Yeah. But at the same time, at least it's something, Give them something.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What can you do? Like, that just sucks. That kind of apology is just superficial and really doesn't do much to address the problem.
I mean, it's more than what we've seen any other popes do, but so like Francis, like right from the get-go, he has at least kind of spoken about it.
He's spoken about it, and he's
been like sort of proactive in bringing it up, kind of thing.
He's acknowledged that it happened and it's been happening, but what he didn't acknowledge was the cover-ups. Which really,
he didn't really acknowledge the systematic nature of it.
The systemic cover-up.
Yeah.
Well,
yes, they seem to just move them about.
No, I think actually
like
he did, because I think at some point they had like some kind of conference and they wrote up a policy. They wrote up a policy. Oh no, this wasn't him. No, in the early 2000s, some kind of conference happened, and they wrote up a policy, sort of saying that priests would have a responsibility to report abuse or whatever.
Right.
It is. But it seems like that was like sort of a marketing tool, because there were existing at the very same time internal church policies.
That's kind of a too little too late.
Saying, no, but there were internal church policies at the exact same time saying that the clergy doesn't have a responsibility to decry abuses. So
it's one thing to come up with come up with a policy and quote unquote require priests to report abuses within their diocese, but it's another thing to not acknowledge the fact that they've been covering this fucking shit up for like, decades.
In a sense, you're claiming that in order to move forward here, a full admission as to the extremity of the details of what occurred here, the systematic nature in which this cover-up occurred, you feel that this could help their case.
It would be
helpful to us, the peoples of the world that want good things, kind of thing.
I mean, everybody knows it. like the grand jury report and the German bishops' conference report. These are just they bring it to light, but everybody knows this has been going on for God knows how long. Not to be ironic or anything. Also, want to address the irony of recording this episode on a Sunday. Just saying, but I don't know where I was going with that. I can't remember my train of thought there.
Well, so I wonder if the Pope speaking out about it is maybe just a result of the current climate, which doesn't permit him to remain quiet like the previous popes could.
Yes, the Me Too
so
movement.
like, is it that he's different, or is it that the time is different? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the fact that he can't sweep this.
Well, he can't sweep it under the rug. Yeah, they're bleeding sort of membership in the church like never before, right?
Yeah, and these are only 2 reports out of countless others that are still ongoing, right? What really bothers me about the findings is that in the Pennsylvania grand jury report, a lot of the cases have already passed the statute of limitations, which means the priests responsible will not face any kind of jail time or any kind of trial for their actions, and a lot of the other priests are already dead.
Yeah.
So one of the actions that they want to take out of this is to revise statute of limitations to permit prosecution, because these crimes have to be punished. They have to go through. Again, I say they have to be punished, but I want them to go through due process, just as with anything, because that's the system and that's how it works. Put them through the paces. If anything, at the extreme end of the scale, I want to say bring the Pope to the fucking International Criminal Court so he can face responsibility for what's been going on. Sorry isn't enough. There have to be actual repercussions for their actions.
I don't really know what punishment does, or what a punishment. Like, I don't know how I feel about punishment in general, sort of thing. But I'm certainly.
Well, there has to be at least dismantling of the means to continue the
Yes,
the atrocities,
and admittance, full on admittance, kind of thing. But I would suggest, though, is this Pope right now not sort of a Pope of the peoples? Like, he's a little closer in there with the peoples, and
he's a little bit closer.
He's spoken out against capitalism and claims he's a Marxist and stuff like that.
But then at the same time, he turns around and still condemns the use of prophylactics in Africa. Yeah, I mean, they still have church policies to uphold, no matter how down to earth.
Is he saying just don't have sex? Like, what is his stance on that?
This is going off subject. The church's official stance on contraception is that it's a sin because it prevents procreation.
So boners belong to God. Boners ejaculating into vaginas, that belongs to God. No,
every sperm is safe.
Every sperm
is
sacred.
that process. It's ridiculous.
It is pretty ridiculous. I mean, like, why not revise that policy? If you can, for example, let's take a look at the previous Pope and his doing away with the idea of limbo, right? For
they didn't like that very much.
Yeah,
though,
he just declared that limbo it's not a thing anymore, right? So, like, by virtue of his office, he can do that.
No, but then he couldn't. They would put out a statement the next day going, no, really this.
Well, my point is, the Pope can change church policy. Just
didn't
like
this
that.
Didn't this Pope declare that atheists don't go to hell?
Yeah.
That's right. But then the church puts out a statement going, no, he didn't mean that.
You're right. Like, there was a follow up to that with a couple of like cardinals or whatever. Like, about that atheist thing. I guess they kind of still go to hell depending on what they do, but I don't. But church policy can change, and I think it's really important for this particular policy about the prophylactics thing to be changed, right? If he wants to be a Pope of the people, acknowledge that people are suffering.
About the abuse and the covering up and the shuffling around of abusers and stuff to different dioceses, have there been any actions by the church that were like actually meaningful, like defrocking or excommunicating
only
people?
Recently the Pope did he accepted a bishop's resignation recently, I think, and quote unquote sentenced him to a lifetime of penance and prayer. I can't remember the name of the bishop, but like, aside from that,
That's not excommunication.
No, it wasn't specifically excommunication. It's just
Why isn't that like the number one thing? First of all, like if you
you can't be a
if
priest
you
anymore.
Abuse your position in the institution that is meant to kind of discourage humanity's propensity for sin, and you use that institution to facilitate your sin. Isn't that like the ultimate transgression against the church and the ultimate thing that should get you excommunicated?
one would think. And if I were Pope, I would certainly do it that way. But I'm not Pope, so I can't.
I'm not Pope.
Hashtag I'm not Pope. If the Vatican would like to sponsor the show, we will take your dirty money and give it to a worthy charity,
Well,
which
what
you're
money
not
isn't
doing.
dirty? All money is dirty now.
Well, this is especially dirty money.
So
God.
another thing that I guess would prevent or would enable or foster this kind of lack of action in addressing it, wouldn't it be that so the clergy might actually feel like a duty, right, a moral obligation to prioritize protecting the institution before the obligation of acting on individual incidents of victimization, since they view the institution as like sort of inherently good. The institution is good.
Right.
So
But isn't that
so there are actors within it. There are like quote unquote bad apples, right?
But isn't that telling of a cognitive
misusing-
dissonance within the clergy? Like,
well, yeah. There's a cognitive dissonance within the humanity, right? Like
yeah, like if they uphold the organization as being a supreme moral authority, and yet they view these actions as morally reprehensible, they can't. You can't touch.
They see it as a greater good, I guess. Like I'm trying to imagine being
that's
in
it.
their
They
position.
see it as a greater good.
Right. It's like the husband that has an affair that then feels the lie is good because he's upholding the marriage then, and
yeah.
we don't need to mess up with the kids' lives just because I got a blowjob,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
But the very fact that this kind of sin and abuse can exist within the institution undermines the claim that it has any moral authority.
Right.
Or
It
divine
immediately loses its value and
special
integrity.
claim to
Like,
it. Yeah.
Yeah, any kind of
So
special
there's-
claim
so-
to
so-
morality is
so
thrown
there-
out the window.
Yeah, there's the cognitive dissonance
God,
you're
that-
talking about. How can it be ultimately good if it's ultimately like if it's used as the ultimate tool for covering up and
Yeah, hiding evil,
and hiding evil, right? Like
I want to touch back on that God thing that I was talking about, the three possibilities that I brought up.
Right. There's more possibilities than
Okay, well,
that. This is
how do you
what I
think-
was like.
Let's talk about that then, because I think I outlined the only three possibilities that can exist. Either
Well,
Okay,
right away, you're
right,
claiming
right.
to have an understanding of a god, which
Well,
I
okay.
guess all religions are trying to claim, but you yourself are also making that same claim. Like, in a sense, you become just as bad as a religion.
well, no, let's look at the possibilities that I outlined. Either
yeah, list them again.
okay, so either God was unable to intervene to prevent it, making him inept or incompetent, or he was unwilling to intervene to prevent it, making him immoral or evil, or God does not exist. So either unable, unwilling, or does not exist. Can you think of any other possibility in there?
No, I think that pretty much covers
Yes,
all
yes.
the logical
There, for example,
possibilities.
you are claiming an understanding of what that unwillingness would be.
Understanding of the being is irrelevant to the three possibilities. Either that being is
No, I'm talking about the idea of unwilling, just that one.
okay.
You're claiming that you understand what the unwillingness would be.
The only thing
concerning.
I'm claiming to understand is my own sense of morality,
Uh-huh.
and those actions do not fit within it.
So your sense of morality is to stop the immoral deed from occurring. Kind of thing.
if you have the means and opportunity to do it, with which an omnipotent God
Right.
just automatically does have
by virtue of the definition of
of
all-powerful.
omnipotence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the only reason why God wouldn't be preventing the abuse of innocent children is because he's unwilling for some reason. Like,
Some might make the argument against unable to say because God is maximally powerful that, there are certain situations in which he can't act, but that makes that God useless. That's not any kind of. That's not.
I like this. That God
So
could be useless.
He's maximally powerful, not all powerful.
That's the new label that a lot of apologists have adopted. Because
Isn't that sacrilegious? Because I mean, they're pretty clear about God being all powerful.
But the apologists use this new label because they realize the paradox of could God create a rock even he couldn't lift kind of thing. So instead of all powerful,
or
they
microwave a burrito so hot that even he couldn't eat it.
So by virtue of that paradox, instead of omnipotent or all powerful, they're going with maximally powerful, right?
Yeah, that's such a cop out.
It is a cop out. That's why I have no respect for religious apologists. It's just they, as soon as they realize that their reasoning is flawed, they change the reasoning to make it a little less flawed, but is still logically inconsistent.
Yeah. Inconsistent. That's yeah.
That was like a Rain Man moment. Yeah. Inconsistent. Yeah.
Definitely inconsistent. Yeah, definitely inconsistent.
So when you said I was being heavy-handed with my God analysis, I don't think that's accurate.
I just feel like I guess it's difficult not to become heavy-handed when you're talking about God stuff in general. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be be critical.
I think these scenarios are something within they're worthy of being heavy-handed, because what kind of if that kind of God exists and did nothing to prevent it, that's not the kind of God I want anything to do with. It's not deserving of worship. It's not deserving of praise. The idea that, hey, I'm gonna let you rape all these kids for now, but just you wait. Once you get to hell, then you'll be punished. That's even fucking worse. You're permitting something to occur on the off chance that these people will be punished at some point later on.
Well, I could give sort of I don't know if this would be an argument sort of thing, but I'll create a scenario where you've got two gods. You've got a God that is direct action, and then you've got a God that's indirect action. And then we have to determine which one has actually done more sort of thing. It's a very difficult thing to do. If we have a God that goes, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to kill I'm going to kill Hitler as a baby. None of that stuff will ever happen. Great. We'd never know.
Right.
Or we could have the God that comes along and goes, okay, well, I'm just going to be kind to this Hitler. And then therefore he won't develop into that person that goes off to do those things. In that case, again, we wouldn't know.
Right.
So
but
in
this case, we do know because these children got raped.
Yeah.
And if a God exists, it was either unable or unwilling to do anything about it. This
a
we
real
do
Christian
know.
would say, God works in mysterious ways.
There's nothing. Okay. The appeal to
Ask
mystery.
Jordan Peterson.
Ask Jordan Peterson. Lobsters.
Is there a paradox that just prohibits the concept of free will, which apparently God is kind of experimenting with humanity, right? He's given us free will, and then he just lets it play out.
The Christian God is all about free will. Are the
I
other
think
gods
so,
about
yeah.
that too?
Free will is necessary within Christianity because it allows us to either be saved through choosing Christ or go to hell by not. It's that ultimate choice that really determines the validity of Christianity in terms of.
So it's not a God of direct action. It's a God of here are your cards. You just need to play them now, kind of thing.
See, that's the thing that gets me and doesn't make any sense. That would invalidate the idea of prayer, wouldn't it? If God has a plan and he's following this plan and every action is in keeping with God's plan, why would anyone pray to change that plan? Can God change his mind? If so, is the prayer itself part of that plan? Why would God
change his mind if he's all-knowing?
If we're looking at something like an idea of prayer, our idea of prayer might be different from what Jesus was claiming prayer was, sort of thing. So I don't know what prayer even means. We think we know what people are claiming prayer is, where you just basically it's like a lotto service. You ask for it, and you may or may
a suggestion box.
Yeah, it's like a suggestion box.
God's suggestion box.
Whereas I don't think I'm gonna say that's
outside
probably
his door, his office. Let's see what's in the prayer box today. Sorry, little Jimmy, I'm not gonna cure your cancer.
Whereas I
Next.
don't think the person that maybe I don't know exactly where the idea of prayer prayer came from or where it was popularized within the whole canon of like Old Testament and New Testament and all that shit. But what I'm suggesting is Jesus and his idea of prayer may not have been this
well, Jesus
idea
followed
box
he followed
type
the
scenario.
Judaic idea of prayer because Jesus was a Jew, right? Like that's where he got it from. All his ideas were Jewish up until the point where he started to question Jewish authority.
Up until the point where he started to think for himself, kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
yeah. Yes, so right, he would have had this template set
Yeah.
in, and then it would have been difficult to deviate from it. So he'd have patterns that he'd still be following from the old rules and stuff like that. Was I going somewhere with this? Choo choo.
You were talking about free will.
Oh, free will.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you want to pick that up?
No.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah. I also saw a bit of a parallel with this whole church abuse scandal and cover-up with the police.
Yes. Yeah.
The
very
police
similar.
issue, like the whole Black
The
Lives
needing
Matter
to protect
thing,
the idea
the
of
thin
us
blue
more so
line,
than what we represent.
you know, like
That's an interesting thought.
so like with the church, with the police, you've got this institution that's ostensibly set up as an institution to protect and serve, right?
So you're alleging like protecting their own kind of thing, Band of Brothers type of deal.
Yeah. So you get these cases of police brutality and clearly like excessive force and even they kind of make it a policy because any half measures just increases risks for your brothers in blue or whatever, and so the institution being viewed as inherently valuable and kind of being heroized. We're heroes. We fight the bad guys and we stop the bad guys. And so
right.
when there's actors within the institution that do bad things, you can't just admit to it and admit a chink in the armor of the whole thing, because then you're undermining the inherent goodness of the institution, right? And so you've got these like paid suspensions and you never get like a clear apology, and you get these people who are just like building on charges to people who might accuse the cops of brutality or excessive force. And
right, so it's almost to claim this idea is we're upholding the title more so than what it actually means.
Yeah,
we're not upholding anything. We're an important institution. We
so
must
again,
protect ourselves.
Yeah, so again, there's this like idea of the greater good, right? Where they might know that the individual actor who beat the shit out of somebody they were arresting is wrong, but you can't actually there's no possibility of instituting a mechanism to actually atone for it or stop it because that would undermine protecting the greater good of the actual institution of having some institution that stops bad guys.
We will stop ourselves from doing it until we're forced to do it, and then we will set up a mechanism only because we're forced to, and only at that moment will we admit our flaws, kind of thing.
Like, oh man, we got caught. Now we have to do something.
Yeah, now we have to do something once we've been caught. If we could just keep this under the radar, we are still good.
Well, that's an interesting hypothetical thought, right? If these reports hadn't come to light, would the church have just gone on status quo raping children? I want to say yes, because just based on, it's probably a fallacious argument, but just based on the repeated nature of
fallacious argument.
Yeah, by nature of the repeated abuses throughout history that just kept happening and happening and happening, would tend to suggest that this would continue happening had they not been caught.
Mm-hmm.
Right, they would have ignored it, basically. And it would have just continued happening.
Right.
By ignoring it, yeah. Yeah, they were forced to face it. We, the peoples, went, no, you can't, please
but at the
leave
same
little
time,
Timmy alone.
There's a big bias that plays there in the people who are inside the institution, that are thinking like any accusation that's leveled against one of their own is first off a lie until proven true, and they don't have any incentive to prove it true, right? They and usually people go with their intuitions and prejudices first and don't really go much further unless they have to. So if their first intuition is that, this is somebody who's attacking a voice of God or a representative of God's house, then the accuser is in the wrong, and we're moving this guy around not because we admit that he did something wrong, but because we doubt that he actually did something wrong, and that these are just sinners that are bitter about having their fingers wrapped on or something with the...
Along the same lines. Along those lines, the reports that the Pennsylvania grand jury used were from the Vatican, right? They relied on these priests coming forward and self-reporting this kind of shit happening. And in a lot of cases, in the majority of cases, I think, don't quote me on that, but the names of the priests responsible were redacted from those official documents.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
Yeah, that is fucked up. Like, it goes to the same point you were making.
In their own internal official documents, they redact the name for themselves.
They redacted it when the documents were requested by the Pennsylvania grand jury because they didn't want to incriminate the priests.
Yeah.
Fuck off. There's a... I don't understand it. It touches on the same point you were making. They're going to protect their own.
But I guess that undermines my point, or at least part of my point too, because it means that they're not they have an opportunity there to let the individual answer for those crimes, but by redacting the names and protecting them, now they're actually making the institution complicit in it, and they're undermining the moral authority of the institution.
Right, and there was an uproar from the victims to just publish the goddamn names, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think of that? Should they have published the names of the priests responsible in these cases, or would that create a witch hunt?
Ironic.
Well, I mean, the witch hunt is on anyways, right? We're just blaming the entire industry now, rather than the individuals, just because we don't have their names. So we're just going, well, all of you,
right.
maybe rapists because we don't know, sort of thing. I don't know.
Maybe they just believe in innocent until proven guilty. So until you can actually present evidence to convict someone, they don't feel like they should release any names.
It's kind of like knowing how to make the atom bomb. Should I present that formula or should I not present that formula? It's all what we do with it, So right. who knows? I have no idea. What would we do with those names? Probably just fucking attack them too,
That's I can see that side of the argument. It would, it probably would create a witch hunt, especially given the nature of the crimes alleged, right? We see a lot of examples of doxing lately on social media where someone is accused of doing something and everyone finds out their identity and then they just fucking go after them like a lynch mob online, right? And I'm relatively certain the same would happen with these priests, So,
yeah. I mean, I think that the whole Me Too movement and stuff like that, there is sort of a broader sort of shift of the paradigm in most of society now, or at least Western society that we actually are exposed to, which is about not tolerating abuse and hearing the victims and not kind of automatically disbelieving people when they speak out about it.
It's almost to say we've made a step forward in at least now listening to victims.
Yeah.
But we're not necessarily doing anything with those that are creating the crime itself, who may actually, in a sense, need more attention than victims, in the sense because we want it to stop.
Yeah.
So we're still not quite there yet, socially.
Right.
In a sense, I'm saying that we out the bully and we still beat the bully and do nothing with that and just bully the bully afterwards, which still isn't a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the root cause still goes unaddressed.
Yeah.
Right?
We have very little understanding of how it's possible that someone can want to do these things.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. It's that vow of chastity that's probably contributing to this problem.
I'm pretty sure if I took a vow of chastity, even if I was very young, I would not want to masturbate on a little boy.
That's true.
So no, you can't make these arguments as well. I'm sure.
I think it might be a part of it, but like I don't know what the actual.
Well, everything's a part of it. We can say, right?
Well, sure. What is it that breeds pedophiles within the Catholic Church? Like, how does
maybe it doesn't necessarily breed pedophiles, but it offers an environment that's attractive to people who already are pedophiles. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you've got this whole kind of career path that you can direct yourself to, where nobody's going to ask any questions about you.
Well, man,
going out with girls.
They had a system set up so you could get away with it.
That's the other side of the equation.
With guys and not having normal relationships,
Yeah, like that's the other side of the equation, Luke.
So what is it?
On one side, you have people with a proclivity towards pedophilia looking at different career paths. They see the Catholic Church, hey, this kind of organization would probably let me get away with this kind of shit, right? So they go in knowing
that's it.
I can hang out with little boys without question, and what happens behind closed doors, well, I'm taking confession.
Yeah.
Who's going to question me? I'm a fucking man of God, yo.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe you're right. Maybe the church is an outlet. Maybe not an outlet, but like an avenue.
But so even if that were the case, the idea of eliminating this whole chastity aspect of the clergy would actually help that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you would eliminate that as a factor that is kind of attracting people who want to be able to hide their proclivities. Yeah. So another thing I was thinking about was like these victims that are coming out sort of 40 years after incidents of abuse happen. Like these are kids that were in Catholic schools. And
just saying, there was a statistic that came out recently. I think it was from the Australian report, saying it took on average about 33 years for a victim to report an abuse.
Wow, on average?
Yeah.
It takes at least 33 years for a victim to come out. And a lot of times they're coming out and the people who actually committed the abuse are already dead.
Right.
Because they were already 30 years older than the kids were in the school or whatever. And so obviously there's something there that makes it like not easy to just come out and accuse somebody, and it bugs me like with this whole Kavanaugh confirmation hearing in the States, like everybody's kind of saying that it's evidence of the doubtful nature of the accusations against him that people are coming out 30 years after it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if on average victims of like the Catholic institution's abuse will come out as many or more decades later, even when when they no longer have the option or opportunity to try and get justice from the actual perpetrator against them, well then obviously it's completely spurious to pretend like this is actually evidence of falseness. Right?
No, I know. I think that's just a stupid old man that we've deemed smart saying stupid old man things. Saying, why did it take you so long to step forward? That's just him expressing a stupidity.
Yeah, or ignorance. Yeah.
Like that does speak to the symptomatic nature of that's a symptom of a greater problem in our society. Like we don't tend to. Well, we are more now, but we, in general, have not tended to side with the victims very much. It's more like, well, what were you wearing at the time you were raped? Like, as if that had something to do with it. Like, what the fuck?
Oh my God! I saw some funny, some funny sort of campaign, like an awareness campaign from some place where they were putting commercials out there that were addressing some of these tropes, and so there's like one of them where a woman comes into a hardware store and goes up to like the display of toilets and just sits down and uses one, and then she's like, well, you're just putting these out there, and like they make it like just the idea that putting something out there makes it available to anybody else to come and take it, you know, or and they're hilarious.
There was a traveling, I don't know if it was traveling, but there was an art exhibition a little while ago, it might have been last year, where they actually had on display in this room what the victim was wearing at the time that they were abused, right? Just displays of clothing.
Oh, okay.
And then it had the description of this item of clothing. This is what I was wearing when I was raped, and it was just ordinary shit. Like, you know, it's a real eye opener. Like to visually see their representation.
To contrast that with how big of a place it takes, the whole trope of you know, people wearing, or women specifically wearing revealing clothing or whatever that would somehow encourage a guy to rape them. Yeah.
Mind blowing.
So
long silence. Sorry, you were going to say something there?
No.
Okay. Luke?
Was I going to say something?
I don't know, were you?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So did you guys hear about the recent... There was some reporting on comments that the Pope made in Estonia about not ignoring the context of the past in which a lot of the institutional covering up and abuse
can't judge
occurred.
the actions of the past through our current modern day lens kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, and in a sense, yes, that is also true. But he has to also present, okay, what is now then? Tell us what now is. You know what I mean? And the now is also fessing up and admitting.
That's right. Yeah. But I couldn't help.
I love how I don't have to finish what I'm saying. I just look over and you guys are like, yeah. Excellent, great.
Yeah, I guess that's not great for an audio.
No, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? You guys know.
But I mean, I couldn't help but kind of be able to see charitably what he might have wanted to say there, because I mean, we made some similar comments in this show about like Thomas Jefferson owning slaves, but at the same time being sort of instrumental in dismantling the thousands of years old institution of slavery, right? Like he was setting up a country in which slavery could be dismantled, right? Or
at the same time, though, I'm trying to imagine a context in which, like, we shouldn't judge child rape with the same kind of moral lens that we have today. Like,
what do you think about that parallel or analogy of people who were part of a slave-owning culture and inherited slaves and stuff like that? Should they be judged the same way as a guy nowadays who goes and buys slaves and,
right.
and sells slaves?
In the case of slavery, we should evaluate that situation historically, right, while still acknowledging that it's morally reprehensible to own people as property.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Catholic Church example, though, like, there is no historically valid situation in which...
Okay, I see where you're getting... Yeah.
You know, like, in what culture is that cool? You know? Like,
well, there are cultures where you do have, like, men have sex with boys, and that is part of the culture sort of thing.
Name one.
Name? I don't know.
No.
No, I don't know. Meanwhile, I'm accidentally being racist. No, it's probably not accidental. But no, from what I understand, I don't know any specifics. There are different cultures where a man will basically...
well, what about, like, just...
show the boy how to masturbate and stuff like that, right? So they masturbate together and stuff like that. Like, there's a culture to it, and it's done, and that's what it's like, and it's not pedophilia. It's a man with a boy, in a sense, bringing the boy into manhood by showing him how to masturbate or whatever the case may be, you know.
And these
like
more kind of nuanced explorations of ideas of consent and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Like, these have been kind of teased out like with the Enlightenment and stuff, like really late, right? So there was a time when it was when you had like abusers who are going after kids, I guess, because they don't necessarily know why it would be wrong. Like
Well, didn't a priest even step forward and say, "I just didn't know it was wrong. I didn't know that was wrong."
Yeah, there was a bishop who came out and said, "Well, I didn't know pedophilia was illegal." Like, really?
What?
Yeah.
Well, he may be so ingrained in
Like
the Catholic culture that he really didn't know because the system had been set up for him. Go sit in a lazy boy.
but
Call
he's
upon the
still-
horn of
he's still-
Gabriel.
he's still-
Little Timmy will come along.
he's still-
But
lives
he's
in
still
society.
of at least the 20th century.
I know.
Yeah,
That's a little late to
I know.
be thinking.
Like how?
Like I'm
How
trying to
cloistered-
conceive of
how
a
cloistered can
time
you be to not
before.
know
Have
that?
you not worked retail before? People are fucking retarded, man. Like, how do these people function from day to day? Like, it is amazing that there aren't more car accidents out there.
It's amazing we still exist.
So that's the thing that undermines that point too. Is that while there's no longer a slave industry in the States, the abuse of kids by clergy has gone on right up until the 21st century.
They managed to
So-
keep it covered.
So that's the difference there.
But have they though?
Yeah.
Like this again? These things are no new. This is not news, right?
Right.
We know this keeps happening.
Yeah.
It's happened before. We know it's happened before. We know that. And yet, what happens? It continues to occur, and the outrage comes and goes. Like with the Pennsylvania grand jury report, outrage, immediate outrage from a lot of people, and then it kind of wears off as the media narrative goes back to Trump and whatever fucking tweet he came out with that week.
Yeah.
And then we kind of change the channel on the conversation and we forget about it until the next report comes out, and then we get outraged again.
Well, I think that they're socially learning these things. I think that there is an element of shock. We also can't believe it, even if we're reading about it and learning about it. It takes a long time for it to really sink in.
Yeah, what I think I'm getting at though is like how long until we actually do something. How long until the church actually does something to address this problem?
There is that idea of when can we do something? What is the doing something? What would that be? What would a doing something be?
Well, it's not just a little apology from the Pope saying, "Well, sorry, it happened. We're going to try to do better this time."
Yeah.
Then do better.
It's an entire system he has to mess with, right? It's such a massive bureaucrity.
Sure, but how
I
about
wonder
this?
what that would
How
even
about this
appear to
though?
be.
Don't rape children. How's that for a policy? How's how hard is that? Don't rape kids. Don't diddle little boys.
Right. The Pope in his castle should go, we should probably get rid of the rape room, We should maybe not have that room anymore.
Maybe not shift rapists around.
Well, that's where the institution, where the church's fault comes in, though. It's in the covering up of it. Like that's the most perverse.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not the most perverse. They're equally perverse. Like people who should know that it's that it's horrendous to abuse children are covering it up like that.
Why? Because
that's fucked
it's
up.
bad publicity. It's bad publicity. But you know what? It happened. Don't fucking shuffle them around. Report this shit and maybe try to stop it.
I guess what we're saying is we want to now see the antithesis of what they presented to us. We want to now see them deal with it in a compassionate manner that we feel is making a social contribution, a good difference,
Right.
is what we want to see, and we're not seeing that yet.
Is it meaningful maybe that the current climate is forcing the Pope, for example, to at least pay lip service to policies like now saying that yes, the church should turn these cases over to local law enforcement, because he's actually made that statement.
Yeah.
Does that mean something? Does it mean that there's a trend that maybe we could see?
That's really just passing
some action
one
on it?
institution's moral problems onto another institution that has its own moral problems. Like that would be the church now going, well, I guess they can do more good than we can. You know? And
it might
what's
just be
that?
a passing
That's also
of the
nothing.
buck kind of thing.
It's
We're not
also
gonna
just a
deal with
passing
it.
of the buck.
Let them deal with it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I can see both sides of that. I think it is a sign of. It's a good sign. It's a good first step. But on the other hand, why aren't they just dealing with it?
Well, what's this dealing with it? What would you suggest this would appear?
A policy that says don't rape kids.
A policy,
You know?
paperwork.
Well, paperwork.
This is our solution. We need a contract.
At the same
We
time,
need a signature.
At the same time, why should it come to
No,
that?
but
Why does there have to be a policy that says don't rape children?
So that's weird. Like I don't think it's reasonable to expect like every institution by that logic should have an explicit policy that says don't murder or an explicit policy that says don't steal.
Yeah, it seems ridiculous.
Like these are
it is
already
ridiculous.
these are already laws
Yeah.
on the books in Greater Society. There's prohibitions against it. When it happens, you report them to
Right.
the body that's actually mandated with handling that.
Yeah.
So that the policy is just, report as you're supposed to any illegal activity. Right?
I think that's what I mean by don't rape kids.
I guess that is what we want. We do want some sort of fuller disclosure of, in a sense, if they were to present to the public, here is how we covered it up. Like it would be.
I'd like to see an admission.
Additionally devastating in terms of us looking at them and seeing what they had become and what they let happen and stuff like that.
I think that kind of admission on the part of the Vatican would that would go a long way. Like, okay.
But go a long way. So let's think in terms of them trying to protect themselves
would it
to
save
at
their
least continue
reputation?
to exist.
Would it be a death knell?
I don't know, but I think it's something that needs to happen. Like, we recognize that this is a problem. We have been covering it up, and now we're like, I don't know what the after part of that would be, but like an admission that this is in fact taking place.
Yeah.
Rather than just saying we apologize for it and we recognize that this has occurred. The part that's really missing is the confession that they've covered it up systemically for decades. Yeah. They've shuffled priests around when they've been found to have done these things. And
it's like they're willing to admit that there are all these anecdotal kind of individual cases.
Right.
But as soon as it goes to the idea that there was a systemic kind of program to cover it up, that like anything short of admitting that is okay, but that's
because I think it's because they would, by saying that there has been a cover up, they would admit being complicit in the entire affair, and that's not something that they want to deal with.
I think that they would they would, I guess, lose a lot of followers.
But would they? Let's just
would they actually look at the pussy tape? Like did Trump lose any followers?
No, you're right. We now seem able to just bulldoze through life, continuing to believe what we believe, and
that
hopefully just not die.
It brings us back to my first question, or maybe indirectly, but why do people continue knowing this? Why do they continue to support the church? Like they will go. Some people will go so far as to say, I know it's happening, but
that's it.
But it's the but. They try to rationalize their
tribalism is kind of inherent with religion, right? Like or
you can't take away that foundation from the person, or else they're then left undefined, and for them they may just go crazy. Like when you talk to a very religious person about why they're religious, one of their arguments is, well, if I don't believe in God, I'm gonna go around raping and killing people.
Yeah.
So people would be destroyed. People would suddenly not know who they are.
Yeah, it would be identity shattering. Like, but at the same time, it's like, okay, if you're going to continue believing in God, fine, but you do not need to support the Catholic Church in order to do so. Mm-hmm. You can do that in the comfort of your own home, pray whenever you want, whatever. But to support an organization that has been found to be criminally responsible for these acts, I just can't do that.
Right. Like you basically want the Catholic Church to go, we haven't been representing God, but now we are.
Yeah.
So all that stuff in the past, not so good on us. But here we go, fresh start.
Yeah. But I mean,
now we're into
you'll
God.
just
Now we know
always
what God's
have
talking about.
you'll just always have the rationalizations because the institution is sort of their religious identity, right?
Yeah.
Then it's their team, and the initial reaction always has to be to sort of rationalize a way to absolve the institution insofar as it represents their ideology and their identity and their values and morality.
Yeah, it's only those priests that did it. My priest is fine. Like, that doesn't happen in my diocese.
So it's fine to admit individual cases, but again, you're going to fall short of letting the entire institution take the fall, so to speak.
Couldn't be my priest. Well, how do you know that?
Yeah.
How do you know your priest hasn't engaged in this kind of activity? How do you know?
Mm-hmm.
Could turn out to be that he did.
Yeah.
Final thoughts on the issue of the Catholic Church?
Well, I think we want them to fess up to a fuller extent, I guess, is what we'd like to see, right? Like, this seems to be a conclusion that we came upon here in this conversation, that we feel that they haven't really stepped up to the mic and really admitted the full extent of what's happened here.
Mm-hmm.
And quite even possibly continues to happen from what we can gather, since it's such an established institution.
Yeah. So, is that the end of your final thought?
Well, I don't like to have final thoughts.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I can barely claim I have thoughts at all. But
so I guess my final thought will be A, don't rape children, and B, don't establishment of religion.
don't what?
Don't establishment of religion.
Don't establishment. Well, man, don't
Like,
establishment.
Yeah,
Like, it's very, very
establishment,
difficult for something to exist and not eventually become corrupt. The more we try to define things, the more corrupt and it becomes, really. The more we've tried to fit that square into a circle hole kind of thing, you know? It's just a bunch of fucking bullshit out there. Be good to each other.
Well, because the problem with the whole establishment of religion thing is that you're like literally setting up something that makes actual doing right and wrong harder, because you're setting up things that kind of prevent you from being able to act on what you know is right or wrong, because it kind of confuses the issue.
It paints
you
your ability
set up
to
an
identify.
institution that's supposed to represent what's right and wrong, and then how do you ascribe blame to that institution, you know? It's like these blasphemy laws. Blasphemy laws are basically a backdoor to prevent you from actually being able to attack the institution of religion. So it's like there's a lobbying group that manages to get the secular society to do its work for it. Like, we can continue our abuse with impunity, or we can at least continue to be shielded from any attacks, whether legitimate or not, because there's an outside secular institution now that's preventing us from being criticized, you know, and we call it blasphemy because that makes it more kind of visceral and more about you're attacking my identity and my religion, my beliefs. My beliefs. You're attacking my beliefs.
My beliefs. My poor beliefs.
You were getting sexy there, the way you were saying that.
Yeah.
As for myself, I think it's pretty clear that the Catholic Church has no authority on morality. Like, I don't think people should be getting their morals from the church or from their Bible either, because of all the shit that goes in there, which we've talked about, and we'll talk about again during our morality episode. I think the church needs to come clean about the extent to which they've covered up these crimes, and they need to take more action than simply paying lip service to the victims. I think more needs to be done, essentially.
Yeah.
This has been Critical Junction, episode 48. I'm Mark.
I'm Mary Louise Parker. Luke, fine, I'm fine. Luke.
I'm Joe.
As always, thanks for listening, and until next time, keep thinking critically.